This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Oh, good day. How you going? Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I hope you're well. I was covering a lot of ground recently, traveling around Australia, trying to check out what's going on with property, amongst some of the other things I do here at Momentum Media, and always like chatting with property investors. Often they'll come over to yarn to me. For some reason, they might recognise my voice, and it sort of reminds me just how wide-reaching this podcast is when I get that really positive feedback. So I do get a kick out of it, chatting with property investors. I'm a property investor myself first, probably journalist, if you want to call me that, second. But my job really is to navigate conversations with property investors, see what they're doing, and also those people that support property investors. And you would have seen a lot of that on Smart Property Investment over many years, chatting with demographers and research people and buyers agents and mortgage brokers and financial planners and accountants and all and sundry who support property investors to create wealth through property. Most property investors I know are looking to make a few bucks on the way in. They might enjoy property, but they're doing it for a purpose that is around this wealth creation journey with an eye towards potentially retirement, whenever it is for people. But yeah, the chats I like having, and today's going to be very much one of those. Got Katie Silver on the line. She joins us, property investor, also journalist, taking, I think, a bit of a sabbatical from her career for a little while to look after a newborn, which is really cool. It's a journey that a lot of us get to go through. Katie, how you going? You well?
Hi, I'm well. Yeah, I guess I'm a journalist first, property investor second, pretty much the opposite of you. But yeah, maybe with time I'll switch those titles around.
Maybe. I think it's sort of one and the same. And I think my property investing helps me be a better journalist. But I think on the flip side of that, Katie, my journalism probably helps me be a better property investor. I guess I get to pick up the phone and speak to anyone in Australia when it comes to property investing. So in many ways, being a journalist gives me the privilege to do that. And the best journalists I know are always keeping their ear out and learning along the way. And I think that's one of the sort of basic fundamentals of being a good journo, is being a good listener. So it's a job as a podcaster. But what sort of journalism do you do, Katie?
TV and radio. So I do actually do business journalism. So not particularly property, but yeah, I guess I do look at macroeconomic trends in my job, which is obviously linked
to everything. And do you count podcasting as journalism, or are you one of the old diehards and say,
no, definitely
it's radio and TV?
I do radio, and they all end up as podcasts as well. So very much so. And I think it's obviously, like you, I think it's a great way to reach a new audience that you don't necessarily get when you're on the AM and FM.
Yeah, and you're on air doing all the on air stuff, or you behind the scenes type of thing?
Yeah, a bit of both. But yeah, I'm a presenter on BBC World Service. So I've been based in Singapore, and off the back of this maternity leave, I'm likely to be based in the UK.
Okay, sounds pretty cool. And home for you originally, Sydney?
Sydney, yeah. Sydney born and bred.
Nice. And how'd you fall into journalism? I think most people fall into journalism. Were you one of those people where you were like a junior reporter working around the playground looking for stories for the local sort of school newspaper?
Well, sort of. I guess so. I always wanted to be it. And then I studied other things at university. I did a combined degree in science and commerce. And then for a few years, I guess, forgot that I wanted to be a journalist because I was going down that route of, chartered accountants and that sort of thing. And then at the age of 23, kind of remembered and started doing internships at the end of university. And yeah, one thing led to another. In terms of, I finished off my degree in Mexico and worked in an English language newspaper there, and then kind of got an internship with CNN. So I was doing that. And of my career, I guess I've spent 3 years in Australia, which is where I really buckled down into like looking into property and bought what I bought. But yeah, then other than that, I've been mainly based abroad.
And obviously it's a show around property, but we're talking about journalism, and it's sort of connected. Why journalism for you? Because I know you don't get paid a lot of money in journalism. So.
No, and funnily, that's probably also what got me into property. Was like I needed to find another way of making money because I never thought I'd make a great deal in my career. But yeah, I think I love it. I guess as you sort of say, get to ask people questions. It gets you access to people that you wouldn't otherwise have access to, which is fun, and you're learning every day, which is the beauty of it. You're finding out about something else every day. You're speaking to people. Yeah, I'm really lucky. I love my job.
So what do you think it counts to actually call yourself a property investor? because you don't have a huge portfolio, but you're probably representative of most property investors in Australia. So if you're invested in property, you're a property investor. But I think people get absorbed by it, and they probably change their paradigm towards their view of it, and they become a property investor first. But, is everyone a property investor if they're even considering looking at property? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think probably yes. I mean, as you say, I've got, now only one apartment. I had two, but it's not significant. And I did, squirm a little when I kind of got asked to be on this podcast, because I'm not sure if I necessarily have enough to be considered a property investor. But I do think as soon as, I bought my first at 25, and from then on, as soon as the conversation goes to property, I'm excited. Your ears prick up. And I think that probably makes a property investor is that kind of excitement around what's on the market, what trends are doing, where interest rates are going, either what regions are going to be up and coming or are dying, or if you're more like me, and I probably typically, more like kind of blue chip properties, buying in places that I personally would be happy to live in, or, not as like the slower growth places. But, I guess looking at it, you could call it property porn. I love looking at floor plans, which I think probably most people who are into property do.
Yeah, a lot of property investors are dreamers. I know I do. I look at floor plans, go, I'll do this differently, and I reckon I can do this. And that's just the inherent property investor that exists in a lot of people. And I think particularly in Australia, we have a love affair of property. And no doubt, Katie, you're probably the same as me. If you want a good dinner party guest, or you want to have someone who can liven up a dinner party, always invite a journalist along. They've always got opinions, and they'll tell you what they think, normally because they just have such broad access to what's going on in the world. But every dinner party I go to in Australia always ends up talking about property.
Yes, it's very high on the agenda in Australia. And it's interesting because, in the UK, I noticed very different. It's harder. Well, it's very hard here to get on the property ladder, but it's very hard there, I think, because the salaries are so low. So people aren't as interested because it's inaccessible for so many people. Whereas I think here, yeah, absolutely, it's a big part of conversation.
Yeah, and you mentioned you got into property sort of, I think 24, you mentioned, so early-ish 20s, which is a great time to get started. The sooner you can start in property, here's a tip, the sooner you can start in property, the better off you'll be as a result of it. So I'd like to sort of break that down, how you actually entered the market. We'll just go to a quick break. Stay with us, back in a moment.
Creating wealth through property investing starts with getting the right finance in place. At Finney Mortgages, our brokers specialise in investment loans. We know the ropes to get even the most complex deals approved fast. With access to over 50 lenders, we have the know-how and connections to get better rates, improve cash flow, and release equity fast. So if you're looking for a mortgage broker that gets property investment, book in a call with a Finney broker now. Head to finny.com.au, that's finni.com.au today.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show, and with Katie Silver, property investor and also journalist. We've just been chatting about the journalism. It's not necessarily the highest paying job in the world, but a very satisfying job. We spoke about why. But Katie, you got into property pretty early and in blue chip type sort of asset. How'd you pony up the deposit to actually get into property?
Blue chip, I use that word, but maybe that was too strong. I did buy a very old and shabby 2-bedroom in Kensington in Sydney, and I just worked really hard. I had, through university, I got youth allowance, which was a small amount from the government each week, which helped. I worked all the time through university in part-time jobs, doing everything under the sun. So I sort of, and I did do exchange programs, but I did it in Mexico, for instance, and there it was cheap. It was cheap to live. So my youth allowance, actually, I made a profit on that by being in Mexico at the time. And so, yeah, I was just very frugal, I think, in the earlier days until I bought my first place, which was at 25, until I felt comfortable enough that I could service the repayments on that. So, yeah, just lots of work and being very frugal.
Yeah, you got to be working for. I actually got in trouble with youth allowance. I had to pay back some of it because I sort of qualified for it because of my family's sort of financial circumstances. We didn't have any money, but I did a whole heap of part-time work at the same time, went over the threshold, and they went, well, you can't get youth allowance and work at the same time. I went, well, isn't that sort of counter-cyclical to what you want to do? But anyway, I won't get into it. I don't know if that still exists, by the way, but
no, it existed during my time. I'm not sure about now as well. And yeah, it was an absolute nuisance.
It's an absolute nuisance. So anyway, I had to pay all that money back, which is cool. Happy to do it. But so deposit then. So you're working in Sydney full-time, putting as much money as you could away based on sort of, ability to sort of be frugal in your finances. How much did you sort of stack up before you bought? And so, sorry, when did you buy? What?
So I was 25 and I had been in Sydney working with university and whatever until I was about 23. And then I was living abroad until I moved back at 25. And so during that time I was, I lived in New York and I shared a bedroom, for instance, just in terms of how frugal it was. I shared a bedroom with I went through the full rigmarole of early 20s living to try and save some money. And in the end, I'd saved $45,000, which by the time I was 25. And so, I was working at the time as a journalist at Sky News in Sydney. And I was, I had my alerts up on Domain and real estate and basically had just put in postcodes for places that I thought I'd be okay with. And I think it was Hillsdale kept coming up, which was obviously clearly very close to my postcodes of choice. So I was looking around Randwick, those sorts of things, Leichhardt, I guess Inner West or Inner East, really. And I think I put it as 500,000. This was 10 years ago. So not much was coming up other than Hillsdale. And then every so often I'd go and see a place, for instance, in Leichhardt. And then I saw this one in Kensington. And it was a deceased estate, and I think I basically got a bit of a bargain. So it was a 2-bedroom that went for 400,000 when I bought it, which was my limit. And and then sold, as I say, I had it for about 10 years and sold it recently during COVID.
Okay, and what did you sell it for?
685.
Okay, so not a bad return.
No.
Do you have sort of seller's remorse on selling it?
Well, okay, good return, but I must say I was definitely spending money throughout those 10 years. I think I worked out as about $100, I think a month. So definitely a good return, but there was still, I think it was negatively geared. Do I have seller's remorse? Funnily enough, so the place was very dilapidated. It had been used by university students in those 10 years. And I don't know, it was a 2-bedroom, but I think they had a lot of people living in there and it was not looking good. But then when I did the little renovation before sale and hired furniture and did all this, all of a sudden it looked great. And then I had seller's remorse about even putting it on the market. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I, like a lot of investors at the moment, have trepidation about where the market's going. So maybe I sold it May of 2021. And so maybe it's going to be going downhill. I'm not sure. I'm unsure if I've got seller's remorse. I'm sort of half-half.
Yeah. And for the proceeds of that sale, what are you done with the dough? Are you just going to save up and invest again, or you've got it parked somewhere else?
I've got it at the moment in investments like share investments, and I've got a company that manages sort of half of it. But it's been a tricky time on the stock market. So I think overall I'm sort of operating at a loss from this time of, I guess the returns probably came in, about August last year. And then since then, we've seen share market struggle a bit this year, and I probably bought at a high. So that's what it's doing at the moment, but I'm really unsure of it as a strategy.
Yeah, it's a strategy. I haven't looked at my share portfolio for about 2 months because I don't want to.
Yes, I feel the same. You need to go onto mat leave and then you've got an excuse why you're not looking.
Well, I think that, I'm not a share market expert, but much like property, shares are a long-term play. So there's a lot of global forces impacting the share market here at the moment.
Good. I'll take that. Thank you for that remark. I'll just kind of live with that one. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, you win some, you lose some. But this is a property show. So, and in terms of the first property, getting a mortgage and stuff, no worries. Banks were happy to lend you dough. Yeah,
I was fine that time. My parents weren't willing at that point to go guarantor, which would have made life a bit easier. But I think at that time, a couple of years later, when my sister went for it, she had them go guarantor, which did make things easier and smoother sailing. But at the time they weren't. So I got the loan. It was a bit tricky, if I remember. I did have to shop around. I think, I'd been with Commonwealth Bank for years and they wouldn't take me on. So it was St. George in the end that did. But we got there and, And
you subsequently bought another property. I want to chat about that. Let's go another break. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant from the Smart Property Investment Show with Katie Silver, chatting through her investment journey now. First property in Kensington, bought for about 400 odd grand, sold recently, money parked in some other investments, including shares at the moment, waiting for a rainy day, no doubt, to deploy another way. But you've purchased another property in between. When did you buy it? What was it?
So that was when I was 27, almost 28. So I bought the 2-bed in Kensington and I bought a 2-bed in Darlinghurst. in Sydney, and that was a smidge nicer. As I said, the Kensington one was pretty dilapidated, and the Darlinghurst one was nicer, as in I could have probably happily moved in if life had gone that way. And yes, I bought that late 2014 for $622,000.
And have you had it revalued recently?
No, so kind of.
You've probably had a look and worked it out yourself, though.
My guesstimates have been around, $815, $850, around that mark, between $800 and $850. I think I did have it revalued during COVID, but it's tricky because, both those properties are inner city Sydney, which are and apartments, which have obviously become less attractive to renters, with people not working from home anymore. So I did sort of struggle during COVID to rent it out, and I looked at which property to sell. But I find, for example, I'm seeing rents decrease or have decreased. The rent that I'm getting now is less than I got 5-6 years ago. But hopefully when this lease is up, things have improved.
Yeah, and I think during that period of time, the borders are reopened now, starting to get uni students back in. Young professionals are moving back out of their parents' houses back into the city because they're not too impacted as much by COVID. So you'll see that changing. But it's definitely a two-speed rental market at the moment. You go some places, for the life of you can't find a rental property, and I'm talking mainly houses, and there's huge upwards pressure on rents. But then there's other markets where that same upwards pressure on rents doesn't exist. There's a lot more vacancies, and most of that is sort of inner city apartments. So that will change over time. And the current government, and who knows what happens come May, who's going to be in the seat in Canberra, they're going to be looking to bring in, and we need it just purely because of the unemployment level, talented people in Australia to help us out, even across hospitality. It's, just walking around town today, there's a lot of places still closed up, or you can't get stuff done because we haven't got people to do the work. But was there any specific reason for Darlinghurst? Was that, the same sort of process as finding the Kensington one, or you had a particular bent towards Darlinghurst because you thought, well, as a what if, I could always move in there and be happy there?
A bit of both. It was a similar bent. I guess with Kensington too, it was a place that I would be happy to have moved. And yeah, I just similarly had alerts for postcodes all the time on Domain. And when I saw a suburb name that I liked in the range that I liked, then I kind of looked into the property more. So yeah, it wasn't that I particularly liked Darlinghurst, but I was 27, 28. A lot of my friends were certainly living around Surrey Hills and things. So that was appealing.
And what next for you? You're going to keep going with property. You mentioned you're on maternity leave. When do you sort of head back into the office, head back into work? What's the plans?
And the current plan is September. So I've only had a baby 6 weeks ago, and it's really nice to do it in Australia and with my family close by and all that sort of thing. So the plan is to do this stint here and then maybe relocate back to the UK in September. And yeah, gosh, maybe after this conversation, I should think about trying to buy a place here in the meantime. It's sort of, as we discussed, it is addictive. So I could well just think of doing that maybe in this meantime. I haven't really thought about what I'll do next or where I'd buy next. And the market has felt really volatile with the crazy prices that we saw, particularly in the last couple of years. So if that is leveling off, then maybe that could be a fun project for the next 6 months.
Yeah, and it's good that you find a level of satisfaction or enjoyment by doing, as well as it has some sort of positive outcome. That is the sort of wealth creation effect. So if you can get those two things working side by side, it means you'll keep engaging, connected with it, and keep sort of striving towards it. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It feels extremely, very volatile at the moment. And you can look at any market and think, well, it's a bit volatile. There's this, that, and the other. And a lot of people are getting over-absorbed with information, which is sort of shaping how they make decisions, positive, negative, or they're not making decisions because there is so many what ifs at the moment. We're moving into a federal election. We all know that. We don't yet know what's going to happen with inflation, whether or not that's going to shape the way in which the Reserve Bank choose to set the official cash rate. And official cash rate will determine in many ways what the banks do and how much you're paying for your mortgages. So there is a big question mark. That said, also, Aussies got more money on their family balance sheets than ever before. They're ahead in their mortgages further than ever before, and that's a product of COVID-19. How we're working, how we're able to work, particularly those who are in sort of more knowledge-centered jobs, is changing the way in how we live. So there's a lot going on at the moment. There's a big question mark. What's going to happen with this European war? What's happening in Ukraine right now? Who knows how that's going to shape things moving forward? Again, impacts for Australia is just the cost of living. Petrol prices, for example, is directly connected. So I can see why Katie, a lot of people are going, oh, let's just wait and see. You don't want to wait and see too long, because if you just go back, even 50 years, yes, there's blips in values, but the general trajectory is always north in property. So when you're ready to make a call, make a call.
Time to get back in. You don't want to wait and see and then see the fact that you've missed out, basically.
Yeah, could have, would have, should have. But you've got more important stuff on your hands right now as a 6-week-old at home. 6 weeks.
She's a teeny tiny thing.
Wow, that's cool. Are you enjoying it? Having fun?
I am. Learning lots. But it's my first, so it's it's absolutely fun. And an adventure.
I'm sure I can work out some analogy of a baby is a lot like property investing. It's blah, 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 but it's good.
I'd say the baby's more work.
I think a baby's a lot more work.
My experience so far.
It's a great investment, but it's not a passive investment.
That's true. Long term.
Highly connected investment. It's probably the best investment you make. Katie, thanks for coming to join us for a chat today. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot. Me too.
Nice one. And if and when Katie starts buying again, we'll make sure we check back in with her and see what she's doing and how she's doing it. UK property, pretty good as well if you get into that market. I know people who are doing that, Aussies who are somehow connected with the UK, buying up there as well. Lots of stories like this on the smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Go and check it out. Chats with property investors. So Social Media HQ is where you can find us if you like to get your info that way. And just one favour for me, please. If you like what we're doing here, please keep those reviews coming, whatever podcast platform you listen to it. It means a lot, not only to the team, they get a real kick out of that feedback, but there's a sort of the engine of the algorithms with reviews and stuff. It means more people can find us and hopefully make more informed investment decisions. So we get a real kick out of that. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.